Hello, ma'am. Hello. First of all, I want to thank you very much for contacting me with your concern regarding fraud involving your small business. And what has happened is actually very alarming. And what I'm about to say might be difficult to hear, but I'm going to give you the information as best I have it because it's important you know. My understanding is you did something nobody else did, or if other people did, very few people did, which is that you did not go and get a loan from a bank for COVID 19 relief, but you did take the individual COVID 19 relief, which you weren't certain if it was COVID 19 relief or because of the manner it posted in your account and it said that it came from where it did, that it was actually in connection with what you had discussed previously with the IRS as being fraud involving your taxes. And so they had done something to adjust your tax return. So you took that money and you used it as income for your LLC. And in the course of recording, reflecting, and calculating the business cost associated with your LLC and going through the process that one could go through in terms of applying for what the tax incentives are for reporting related to one small business, you would have received a return yourself. And you were going to take that return and put it in a savings bond. And based upon the totality, you only recorded one of the recoveries as part of your LLC because that's what you did. You invested that in your LLC as income into your LLC. And we're going to take $1,200, which was pretty much the amount of what would have been the return, and invest it in a US savings bond. And that's what you were going to do. And you were going to use that bond in a variety of factors that would be connected to having an official, appropriate legal bond. Now, a lot of people have been getting some sort of economic impact acknowledgement from the IRS in a particular manner, but it was supposed to be income for individuals to deal with the economic crisis associated with COVID 19. And you took it and recorded it as income and classified it in your taxes as income. Well, as a result, there was some reason that they intentionally held up your attempt at your tax return as it was originally filed, and you understood it was being used in fraud while they were accessing your electronic accounts and they were using it, and that somebody actually claimed your first effort at a tax return and gave that as credit to somebody else. And so there is another profile with your identity that you've been trying to report for a long time, where the first account is always assigned to somebody else and they use it to do a variety of things, but there's a lot of illegal activity involved, and then it ends up falling on you to deal with the consequences of that illegal activity. Am I correct? Yes, that's the fraud you're discussing. So you tried to file again and adjusted. The second time you filed, you engaged in one manner. And the third time you filed, you again went through the same process, but it had adjusted, and they played a trick on you where instead of it being $1,200 that you could put into a savings bond, they specifically and strategically made sure that the amount of the return would be $12 short of $1,200. 1188. That was the adjusted return after you refiled as a way to say you're going to pay that $12. And you took it as an attempt to extort you using the IRS, that it was connected to your efforts to report on an act of terrorism that had used your accounts and had used your identity going all the way back to 2016 that nobody has addressed up until this time. So you filed it as it was and agreed to put a less amount in a savings bond. You were going to put a less amount in a savings bond, but after you received the return, you were going to do it individually outside of the formal process. And then they adjusted the return and said you owed $12 in tax, and they weren't going to give you any credit for any operating costs or anything associated with your LLC, that it was just a straight 1040 associated with you as an individual who had only made enough money in these other jobs, and you had already gotten the credit for the economic recovery, and you owed $12 in taxes. So on March 23rd, you filed and you paid those taxes officially via what was identified online as being the electronic means by which one could pay taxes to the IRS. It charged your account. You have the receipts. To this time, it has not posted at the IRS. Not only is it not posted, but the electronic accounts associated with your card no longer reveal your transaction history. As of last week, somebody changed the digital portals on what would have been your actual electronic accounts. So you have to get a mobile app downloaded on your phone to even get access to the transactional history. You cannot go online and get that information anymore. You need to be mobilely accessible via your cell phone at any given time to be tracked if you want to be able to access your own transaction history. Because you already know, as part of your evidence accumulation, that they will float. They will charge you, and then it won't clear, but in the meantime, you've got a debit on your account for anywhere from a day to, in some cases, well, now, more than 20 days. You just talked to the IRS, and what did he say? Well, he said it was recorded as a straight 1040. They already gave you the credit. Well, unfortunately, while you were on the phone for 35 minutes, what did you find? What did you find? See, even if they had to adjust and say whatever else was going on, we were not going to acknowledge your LLC. Oh, wait a second. The IRS said that they were going to send you a letter dated for March 29th, which would have actually been 14 days after a fraudulent engagement in a simulation of legal process right here in the Northern District of Texas, U.S. District Court. But they didn't send you a letter dated for March 29th like they said on the electronic account. Your registered agent for your LLC sent you a bill that was timestamped through the post office for March 29th that you had already paid, which was over $300. You had already paid the $300. And if they had to acknowledge that you would use money from that economic impact statement or from the COVID relief, if you would use that money to pay the taxes for your business, then would they then have to have evaluated the other means by which you use that money as you reported on your taxes for investments in your business as well? But instead, they sent you that letter through your registered agent in another state, by the way, not even with the federal government, for a tax you had already paid. And then they sent you another letter, which you were very concerned about, that was dated for what you now know, as of today, based on what you found, was dated for 2 days before major misrepresentations of activities associated with the real estate market, specifically Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And also dated for 10 days before what would have been tax day for somebody that had to file a 1040, or rather 10 days before what in an ordinary budget cycle for the federal government would have been the time frame during which the president would have had to have submitted his first round of budget considerations regarding the annual budget priorities for the administration. And it's kind of one of those things where you're very concerned. And I'm going to tell you blankly, ma'am, I'm concerned too. It appears that somebody stole your identity, stole your house, used your house to get a loan on a vehicle that they were going to use to try to call hits on heads of state in other countries. As if they were going to use your credit after they stole your house to justify getting so-called loans, or rather financing for vehicles that then they were going to use in consideration of your first driver's license issue to literally call hits on people that are in elected office in other countries. And I can understand where you're very dissatisfied. And you're also very dissatisfied because you have been tracking, as part of your business activities, because of what your LLC does, how it was that these numbers and these assessments provided by Fannie Mae right now within this time frame that happens to correlate with this misrepresentation of information from the IRS is also connected to you trying to get someone to acknowledge that you witnessed how the Office of the Comptroller of Currency intentionally and fraudulently misreported information in its risk assessments after an update to the database that was itself a follow-up to another update to the database that happened last summer, when information that had previously been reflected one way the years before had somehow been changed on the official public record that's available through the electronic site. This is very disturbing. And not only is it very disturbing, it reveals a level of criminality at a very alarming level. And it's absolutely, especially in the context of what is going on, and in consideration of how they've tried to classify you as an asset, brings up your concerns that the specific pattern of racketeering activity that trafficked you to Dallas and allowed for that completely racist paradigm to be manipulated through Housing and Urban Development Agency and the budget that the city of Dallas had specific to that, and how it factored into other processes whereby the federal government was involved in significant fraud intending to create moments of insolvency that it now appears confirms your original suspicions, which is that they were going to engage some sort of process of illegal representation and recharacterization in order to misrepresent that certain people who had no debt were in debt, so that other people who had intentionally engaged in fraud could try to use other people and extort other people to get away with it. And we're talking a very high level. Now, I have the record that you paid your taxes on March 23rd, and your bank account, or the account you have, says that you actually paid it. It's been charged. You no longer have access to that money. The changes to the electronic portals you're able to access have also precluded you from being able to confirm the transaction history, but you already have the copies that you had from the actual record at the time you paid it that acknowledges you've already paid it, you've already been charged, and presumably it's already gone. And you also have the electronic notices about what the IRS electronic information says versus what I have right here, right? The actual paper. It says right here. What's it say? And these electronic reports from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are dated for 2 days after, right? And so the thing is insofar as you may have been any number of accounts connected to other people, right? You have already reported you've had 8 Texas IDs and driver's license in just 4 years, and nobody's helped you close the contracts connected to the accounts associated with those ID documents. You've had more than 3 birth certificates stolen. You've had Social Security cards stolen, including Social Security cards that came up later in reports associated with a major agency that has national security implications. And in the course of that, they want you to understand you've been characterized as an unemployed middle-aged woman that is indoors but has no actual job and has no actual real income. And you are coded to 2 over 24. And you found exactly today what they intended to do with that 2 over 24. And the problem is, as I understand what you've said to me, that actually fits into what would have been your national defense strategy, specifically regarding reining in abuse of misuse of the DoD contracting system when it came to trying to aid and abet acts of fraud that also contributed to acts of money laundering that finance acts of terrorism that are allowed to be obscured because somebody abuses their power of political office or their job at a federal agency to cover up for the real crime. And these are very concerning matters. And it does beg the question, are there other people like you? Are there other people like you that actually did the work of governance so that literally on this bipole that they've collapsed your life into? On one level, you're a middle-aged white woman sitting around in her apartment that has a hankering for what kind of food do you want to eat right now? What are you craving? And on the other level, you literally got everything you need to come up with a strategy for this upcoming year in how to address the congressional budgeting process based upon presenting priorities that would have been delivered from the Office of the President to Congress in order for them to spend the time frame necessary to deal with, as well as reconcile what has already occurred. And in consideration of that as well, factor in that your LLC is supposed to be involved in very important matters related to assuring safe infrastructure development and or inspections connected to infrastructure development, and potentially engaged in processes of bioremediation, including in connection with terrorist attacks that have happened in the last 2 years, both in Texas and other parts of the United States, that have a need for some form of bioremediation as a result of the actual impact of those terrorist attacks. I apologize. Just so you know, I'm also investigating your claims regarding fraud involving the Texas Insurance Commission. But so far, everything you said is absolutely sensible, absolutely lucid, and I don't have any evidence to refute your claims. It's 4:14 p.m. on April 12, 2021.